There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. Oh my God, I have a stimulation hangover from the fabulously bookish day I had yesterday. I want to tell you all about it, but I can't even really start to tell you about it until after you watch the chat I had with this week's mystery guest. And one thing you'll notice, and I don't want it to distract you from the main event, which is my mystery guest, but we weren't sitting close enough together, and every time I kind of shift in my chair or turn my head, all you could see is my nose, and that looks a little ridiculous. But the guest is well shown on every level in the video, so don't pay attention to that. Just have a listen to this wonderful chat. This is my Friday Reads mystery guest for this week. This is a former prof of mine and one of Saskatchewan and Western Canada's most wonderful writers, David Carpenter. Hello, Dave, and welcome.
Hello, and welcome to you too.
Well, welcome. I'm here in Dave's writing studio upstairs, and I'm going to show you his library while we're talking, so stay tuned for that. Dave and I have just taped a long chat about his writing life and all that stuff that'll be coming on my channel in a couple of weeks or something. And here he is in or on my Friday Reads as this week's mystery guest. So one question I forgot to ask you, Dave, was what are you working on now?
Well, I swore in about 2020 that I would never write another novel. So naturally, I'm writing another novel. And I find it very difficult to talk about something that isn't quite half finished.
You don't have to say any more than that.
Yeah. But I'm finding the older I get, the heavier lifting the novels are to write. So when anybody asks me, I usually say I'm trying to write a novel.
Well, good luck, and if you ever want to take a break from writing a novel, we can make another video. You can distract yourself.
You bet.
And you're also a huge reader. So what have you been reading recently?
Well, I brought them here.
Great.
One of the books I'm reading right now is Norman Levine's collected stories. It's called I Don't Want to Know Anyone Too Well.
What a wonderful title.
Yeah. He writes apparently simple stories in a plain style, and they often feel like he took them out of his own notebook, and they're almost like memoirs. But I think he does it superbly well, and so I'm deep into the stories of this one.
For people that aren't familiar with Norman Levine, he's Canadian, right?
Yes.
But I don't know much about him.
Yes. He was originally from Montreal, and like many writers in the 40s, he went off to Europe to write and spent a long time writing in Europe. I think he's one of our really great short story writers.
Wonderful. And
we have some good ones. I don't know if he came back to Canada. I think he did, but I don't.
He has kind of been off my radar. That's very interesting. And so you're enjoying them?
Oh, yeah. They're
With
terrific.
a short story collection, especially a collected one that's so thick, do you read them in and amongst other books, or do you sit down and read the whole book out?
Oh no, I might read a couple per week, and once I get through these, I'll be reading that a lot more.
Okay,
quickly.
Wow. I'm curious about that. Great.
And here's a novel by Daniel Kraus. I think he's from New York, called Whalefall, and it's in the tradition of Jonah and the whale, and Melville's Moby Dick, and perhaps a few hairy-chested things by Hemingway. But anyway, the guy writes what I would call a cracking good yarn.
I've never heard of him.
He's a very young writer. Yeah. And one of the achievements so far I've found is that he can make you believe that a man can be swallowed by a sperm whale. and yeah, it's good stuff.
Is the protagonist's name Jonah by any
No,
chance?
no. I would have asked the author the same question. Yeah, and then because I'm doing a lot of research on the 70s, here's David Frum, son of Barbara Frum,
Yes.
a conservative with whom I disagree, but a really good writer and a very thoughtful conservative. You don't get too many of those, in my terribly prejudiced opinion. A true intellectual.
True intellectual. I gave him. He got into my good books for his anti-Trumpian writing. He's one of the
good guys.
No Trump, never Trumpers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but more recently he's been weighing in on other issues where I don't agree.
It's called How We Got Here, and he's doing a really deep analysis of the 70s.
And he would that have been the decade he came of age? I think so, maybe.
I believe so.
I think he's a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
He's maybe in his 60s now.
I would guess so, yeah.
Oh, interesting. And this is, I know you don't want to talk too much about it, but is this research for your novel by any chance?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It is indeed, yes.
Great.
And I just brought this to impress your viewers. This book weighs 19 pounds, and it's called Chronicles of Canada. And this is like a time machine. I'm trying to dial back to the early 70s and the mid 70s and just get absolutely immersed in the conflicts, the big stories, the politics, the culture of the 70s. I lived through the 70s, and they were fascinating times, but I want to broaden my memory a bit. I want to remember more than I remember at the moment. So this comes in really handy.
Well, and that makes me all the more.
Chronicles of Canada.
Yeah, I didn't think we had so many things that would fill a book that big. That's interesting. Well, let me share with you one memory of me in the 70s in Saskatoon. I was growing up on the farm, and I was born in 66. So in the mid 70s, I would come and stay with my grandparents who had an apartment. The Milroy on Fifth Avenue downtown.
Yeah.
And I would come and stay with them. And I was old enough, they'd let me go to the Saskatoon Public Library, the Francis Morrison Library. I could walk there by myself, and I would leave their apartment at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I think I came home for lunch, but it was like I was going to work. I stayed at the library all day reading and photocopying and being a book geek.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Some of my happiest memories. And then eventually, when I was more into high school, I would go over to the university library and do other research. And a book geek from way back.
Very good.
Yes.
These are good credentials. These are solid credentials. Yes.
So that's what I was doing in the 70s. What were the 70s like for you? Can you think of a story or a book? Or
the 70s. To me, the 70s, although they began in turmoil for me, the 70s are when I felt that I came of age. I mentioned to you that as an undergraduate, I was one of these utterly gormless undergraduates who didn't know what the hell he was going to do or why he was studying even. I think I liked being an undergraduate because on Friday I could ask my friends, where's the party? So the 60s, when hippiedom was in full flower, I was sort of guy who would take a joint, but I wouldn't inhale.
Oh, President Clinton.
Yeah, and when we moved into the 70s, I started to get a sense of what I wanted to do, and I started to get a sense of my time. And I finished a PhD thesis in 73, I think it was. That was kind of fun. It was the only part of grad school I really liked. And then in the 70s, I was awarded a postdoc for 2 years, and that got me publishing stuff and translating stuff. And that was fun, I guess, yeah. And then it was also in the 70s when I awakened to the fact that I was a writer, that I hadn't written anything worth reading, but I wanted to give the rest of my life over to writing. So that was exciting.
And that is a great place to end, because the video that's coming onto my channel in the next couple of weeks is going to be a much more in-depth exploration of what happened next. The rest is not only history, but we've talked about it in some detail. So stay tuned for that video. And Dave, this has just been an absolute delight. Thank you so much.
Terrific talking with you.
Yeah, great.
Fellow bookaholic.
Bookaholic. And where's the party tonight?
Oh,
I think this was it.
I think you joke.
Oh, it was so wonderful to sit down with David Carpenter. And as I said there, we taped a longer interview, an introductory kind of interview about his writing life that I think I said is coming here, that will be posted on my channel in a couple of weeks. And we're going to do some in-depth interviews on some of his books in the coming weeks and months. So I am over the moon about all of this. It was my first in-person interview. So let me tell you about the rest of the day. Oh my God. I mean, that was absolutely the highlight, but it was just, the whole day was just one series of fabulous bookish experiences after another. And I'm going to be a little bit coy in describing some of the others, because it started off in the late morning on Zoom, where I interviewed, for the very first time on my channel, a bookstagrammer that I have admired and respected and followed for many years, but we had never had any personal contact until recently. I've invited him. We taped a spot for Zooming in, and we just really connected. It was just so exciting. And I think by the time we'd finished chatting, we had about 2 other ideas for collaborations next year. So that was a great way to start the bookish day. Some of you only watch Friday Reads and not any of my other content. That's why I do a kind of a weekly highlights video, to give you a little taste of what else I'm doing. And some of you probably aren't watching this video because you only watch another kind of video that I make. I make many different kinds of videos, and I put out a lot of content, and I probably only 3 of you watch almost everything I put out, and that's totally fine. But this new series, Zooming In, is going so well, and I'm so passionate about it. The premise is quite simple. Just chats between bookish social media luminaries and myself about one article that's of a bookish topic. The conversations are wonderful because, sometimes we go through the article point by point, but most of the time we just use the topic of the article as a jumping off point, and we talk about that. And they're really fun to do, and I'm bringing a lot of previous guests as well as new guests onto my channel to this series. And they're also short. They're maximum of 20 minutes, but a lot of them are more like 15 or something. And so digestible. I'm putting up every 5 days is kind of my thing, and I've got so many interviews taped. So if you haven't checked it out and it sounds at all interesting, please do check it out. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to say, to give you a little bit of tease for next week, I've decided to go big and get more ambitious with these mystery guests, because that's also something that I feel really excited about. It's kind of reinvigorated my Friday Reads. And so for the first time next week, I will be featuring a mystery guest who has never been on my channel before, and I just kind of audaciously asked her, and she said that would be delightful. So I'm going to keep doing that. Lots of previous guests as well, but occasionally there's going to be some brand new guests that you might be surprised to see on my channel, so stay tuned for that next week. Anyway, to get back to my story, I don't have much bookish content this week, so I can take a little longer to talk about all this good stuff, this fun stuff from yesterday. So I arrived in David Carpenter's neighborhood early, and there's one of my favorite bookstores is there, so I popped in and I thought, I want to kind of catch my breath before I go knock on his door. And so I popped into the bookstore, and for the first time, I've been shopping there for a year and a half, giving them a lot of business, and I've always been chatty, but I've never introduced myself to the owner or told him that I have a booktube channel. And I had that conversation with him yesterday, and he sounded interested in having him or somebody from his bookstore on the channel. So that's probably in the works now. It just feels like I've now been in the city long enough that I feel that I live here, and I'm ready to reach out and make these kind of connections. So there'll be local content more and more on my channel. You know my reading taste. I still read very widely international fiction and fiction from all over and from every possible group, ethnicity, country. And that will never change. But I'm also really excited to bring you content that you probably wouldn't find anywhere else on BookTube, certainly, about what's going on literarily in my little corner of the world. So that is just incredibly invigorating. And then I went to Dave's house. Rang the doorbell. He didn't answer. Rang it again. Phoned him. I said, "Is your doorbell not working?" He said, "Yes, I think it is." And it turned out I was in the wrong street. So yes, he said, I like you better now that I know you're a little absent-minded like me. So, and then I came home and I tried to have a nap, but I was too excited about everything that had happened. I couldn't nap. So I closed my eyes and rested without napping. And then I made the book haul video and started editing it. And then at 9 o'clock, I had a little pre-Christmas little Zoom party with Scott and Nell. And that was just wonderful. Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot and Nell from Book Hunt. We had a really great time. So we made a video that's coming to the channel someday soon too. So, oh my God. I am a little tired today, and I think I look it, but I'm thinking this blouse might give me some color, some adjacent color. Anyway, I have one other biblioadventure, TM the Book Cougars, to tell you about. Last Friday, Mom and I went to a book launch for this new short story collection by a Regina, Saskatchewan writer, Grandview Drive by Tim Blackett. I'd never heard of him. He's actually pretty famous online. I'll talk about that in a minute. And this is his debut collection of literary short stories. He read from them. And, oh, that's interesting. On the title page, and he signed it. But he didn't do this. This was printed on the page. Short stories crossed out, a novel crossed out, fiction. That's interesting. I remember that the conversation was a bit about that they were somehow linked. He was interviewed as part of the book launch by this indigenous Saskatoon writer, Lisa Bird Wilson. I have this novel of hers that I haven't read and got her to sign it and talked to her about coming on my channel at some point, and that was wonderful. I enjoyed the readings from the stories, but it was the kind of thing where I thought, okay, I need to sit down and read these. I can't decide if I'm going to like them or not until I read one or two. So that's fine. But he was so interesting. He is a book talker. And I mean, he's younger than me. Everybody's younger than me, but he might be 40. He's not like 20, but he might be 40. Maybe he's younger than he looks. But he has book talk channel. I'll put a link in the show notes. I have barely checked it out yet myself, but he said some of his videos where he's just talking about what he's reading have gotten 1 million hits. Like, not every video, but he said one or two of them had 1 million hits, and he's got like tens of thousands of followers there. So check him out, and please keep watching little old Sean the Book Maniac after you discover how wonderful he is. But he is wonderful, and the most interesting thing that I wanted to tell you about him is he said he taught himself how to write dialogue in fiction by, again, this all happened in Regina, Saskatchewan. There are exciting things that happen in Regina, Saskatchewan. Going out to public places like Starbucks or food courts or whatever, and transcribing dialogue that he would hear peripherally, and putting them on a blog called Found Dialogue. And that's how he taught himself how to write dialogue. So he also shared, and I'm going to read you, it's a long conversation, so I'm only going to read you the relevant part. And I'll put a link to the full episode. This is from 2012, so it's old now, but doesn't matter. This is part of one of the overheard dialogues. Who's your favorite author? Oh, I don't know. I guess I kind of really like Stephen King and like weird messed up shit like that. Oh, ha ha ha. I've never read Stephen King. Is it actually any good? I like him. Not for everyone, I guess. Too scary for me. Yeah, he's pretty messed up. Who's your favorite? I don't know. There's so many. I guess I'd probably say Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher? You've never heard of her? Yeah, I have. I was going to say, she's written like 100 books. Do you mean Margaret Atwood? Margaret Atwood, yes, who did I say? Margaret Thatcher. Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Margaret Atwood, yeah, I actually do love her. It's no big deal. Who's Margaret Thatcher anyway? Oh, I think she used to be the British Prime Minister or something. Oh my God. And he tweeted this out, and he tagged Margaret Atwood, and this would have been 10 or 11 years ago, and she loved it. And then she retweeted it and said it gave her a real giggle, and then a month later she retweeted it again and said, every time I need to pick me up, I read this dialogue. So check that website out if it sounds interesting to you. And he also has a podcast, which I haven't had a chance to check out yet, but I'll put a link to that. He's a very busy writer, literary fellow, and he launched his debut work of fiction. It won a prize in manuscript form, and I think it's won another prize, so it's already heralded, and it's just been in print for about a week or 10 days. So that was very interesting. I also want to welcome a new patron that joined my Patreon late yesterday. I don't know the pronouns for this person, but their name is Aaron, and they live in Massachusetts, and they have joined at the Book Buddy level and paid for a year in advance. You get a slight discount if you take a year's subscription in one fell swoop. And so welcome, Aaron. I have 2 commenters. Oh, you know what? I think I can. I'm not going to disclose this new patron's last name to you, but now that I realize, yes, I now can make an educated guess that this is a frequent commenter, and because and I still am not sure if it's which pronouns to use. I think ERIN is always female or most. I'm not sure, so I'm not going to hazard a guess. Don't want to screw it up, but frequent commenter on my videos if it's the same one, because the surname initial on the comments fit the full name here. So anyway, Aaron, welcome. Thank you so much. And Aaron has joined just in time to take part in tomorrow's Bookish Brunch, the final one of the year, and that is a benefit that is available to all patrons on any level. It's just a hour-long Zoom chat where you all talk about what you've been reading, and it's really fun. So anybody else that joins before 10 a.m. Saskatoon time tomorrow can also join in. Thank you, as President Biden would say. All right, here's the week in review.
I can see, because the current present with the guy from the gym is sort of like the present. Then we get the past from Hum, and it's sort of our job. There was a middle ground between the writing and us sort of putting the pieces together. And it's not a mystery, because I found myself excited about this. I was also infatuated because I'm being told from very far. I didn't feel a distance, but I enjoyed the distance, if that makes sense. So it was a very weird space to occupy.
But in this case, I don't think I'm being a gatekeeper. I just think scholarship is not the right word. Professor Bernie, what do you think?
I would agree. I think that in ways the conversations had on Bookstagram are just as important, if not more important, than what we traditionally think of as scholarship in like the academic sense. But I think for me, like as somebody who has been in both worlds, I don't want to call what's going on as on Bookstagram scholarship. I want to escape that.
That's really compelling. I have an allergy towards fiction that's about people giving birth to animals or human beings giving birth to animals or stuff like that. It just doesn't interest me at all. But there's enough other things in this opening paragraph that are really compelling that I'm certainly going to not let it dissuade me from giving it a try. And this kind of matches my blouse, doesn't it? So this week I have finished 2 books, and I have 1 book that I'm ready to check in on that I'm a ways into. So that will be my book report. The first one I finished was not a success for me, but it wasn't a complete waste of time. It is the debut historical novel by an Afro-Canadian novelist. This is his debut novel. It's called In the Upper Country. And it has won stuff. Like it won the 2023 Atwood Gibson Writers Trust Fiction Prize. That's a mouthful. So lots of people liked it better than I did. I didn't hate it. I gave it 3 stars. It just didn't work for me because, well, everything that I talked about when I gave my preliminary thoughts on it held right to the end. And I probably wouldn't have finished it, but it was a buddy read. It was a buddy read with Robin, who is one of my bibliophile bestie patrons, and I do not bail on buddy reads with people who are my patrons. It's just, I would not ever do that. But we both thought it was just okay. So as I said when I talked about it a few weeks ago, there were too many characters. It was really hard to keep track of the way that the various stories connected. The one positive thing that I will say that I didn't have a taste of at the early stage, but now that I've read the entire novel, was one of the main characters in the story is a enslaved person who has escaped her captors and fled via the Underground Railroad to Canada, and she is very elderly, maybe 90, 80, and by the end of the novel, I thought that her character and her connection to the narrator of the story was well enough done that I did have some emotional connection to it, so that's great. And lots of people, Lindy is one, the jury of this Atwood Gibson's Writers Trust Fiction Prize would be another group of people, and I think let's see, how is it, what does it look like on, well, it's got a somewhat low rating. It's got a 3.59 rating on Goodreads, so, you know, maybe my opinion on it is not so. I think also the problem is Kai Thomas has researched so much fascinating history about all of that and about the ways in which Indigenous peoples of that era and Black people of that era intermingled, and that's a key part of the story. But there was a lot of history there that he had researched that nobody else, very few people, maybe a few professors and a few ivory towers know about. And I kind of wish he'd written a work of history, and then I could have learned stuff that he had in his head when he wrote the story. But because I didn't have any or very little of that information as basic historical fact, that also made it a very confusing read. I'll be rooting for whatever Kai Thomas does next, and be very curious to see what he does next. So that's my, mixed review of that. I don't really know how to talk about this one either. This is a book that I need to think about. I'm planning to do a full review. I'll give you some preliminary thoughts, but the night before last, I finished the Elizabeth Jane Howard novel, published in 1965, After Julius. Well, it was, there's no ambiguity about how much I loved it. It was a 5-star read, but regardless of the fact that I loved it and it was a 5-star read, I'm still not sure if it all completely worked, but what a daring writer she was. Holy smokes. My buddy reader, Leah from Calgary, must have got sick of how many times I kept using the word juxtaposition, but there was a juxtaposition in this story of a group of rather self-absorbed, horny, not any more horny than probably anybody else, but really libidinally preoccupied characters in the 60s in the UK, juxtaposed with Julius, and the this plot detail is on the backs. He died in the war, not as a soldier, but trying to rescue stranded soldiers in Dunkirk. If you know anything about World War II, it was a big thing. He died attempting that. He did save 1 or 2 soldiers' lives. And to have those two stories bump up against each other and affect each other, because there was stuff about the kind of selfish, socially unacceptable sexual behavior. I'm not talking about gay stuff, I'm talking about adultery. The way that bled into the hero's narrative, and hero isn't quite the right word, but you know what I mean, the selfless story, and the way that the life of service and helping others is working in the consciousness of these really self-absorbed, horny people that can't keep their hands off each other, with characters. Her character work is just incredible. I'm not yet sure if it completely worked, but it's certainly deeply, profoundly engaging, and I would say, even if you're waiting for me to sort out the minutiae of my feelings about it, I can guarantee you that you will be fascinated by it. Goodness gracious, what a fascinating novel. So fascinating that Leah and I have decided to pick up the pace. We're reading Elizabeth Jane Howard in publication order, and at the rate that we're reading and how prolific her output was, it would take many years for us to get to the end. So we're going to do 2 a year starting next year. I'm going to be talking about a book I'm going to start in the coming week for Remember December, so stay tuned for those thoughts. But that's a rereadathon, and this one qualifies too, but I started it a couple of weeks ago. This is a gay novel from about 1997, or at least that's when I read it, I think, in the late 90s. Now and Then, by the British writer William Corlett, who otherwise mostly wrote and was quite well known as a children's author. Yeah, my name is in it, but I only saw back at this time in my reading life, I would only put my name in a book after I'd read it and put the date, so I know exactly when I read it. I don't do that anymore. I probably should. It was published in 1995. This is a book I remember loving. Didn't remember much about it. Have always wanted to reread it. And this is a pseudo-buddy read with Erica from Louisiana, so a Zoom chat about this book. She's already sent me a spoiler alert message to tell me she's loving it. And I'm loving it, so we're going to definitely do a Zoom chat that'll go up maybe in January. I'm going to read it slowly over the course of the month. Christopher is the main character, and in the present of the story, and those chapters are called Now, his father, who he was estranged from because his father could never accept his queerness, has just died. And then the backstory, which really is, I'd say, the heart of the novel, and those chapters are called Then, so Now and Then, are about Christopher as a 12-year-old or something at a boarding school in the UK, and his first love affair and sexual experiences with a boy that ultimately led to scandal and caused the breach between him and his father. And I have read enough chapters now to say, oh my God, I think I'm going to love this even more. The tender, erotic scenes between these two boys, they're not graphically erotic, they're not graphically sexual, but they're so vivid and viscerally described, so beautifully described, that a gay man can't read them without remembering, without re-inhabiting their childhood bodies and all that confusion and squirming and lust. Oh God, it's so beautiful. The protagonist, because it's an all-boys school, he was playing Nora in A Doll's House for the drama club. And so so he's practicing lines with one of the other main characters who's a man, and they have to kiss on stage. And so that's how things start when they're in the older boy's room. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's so beautiful. And another thing that I love is that this is the copy that I read in the late 90s with a completely uncracked spine, but I did underline a few sentences. And so it's just extra special to be rereading the exact same book. I didn't remember how wonderful it was, which makes me think that even though I loved it, it's a book that's speaking to me in a very different way, like maybe because the more of the now part of the story is speaking to me. That, how old was I in 1997? I was 31. So now that I'm pushing 60, the present day narrative is tugging at me in a way that it probably didn't back then. So this is wonderful. All right. There are 2 December readathons that I'm going to at least minimalistically take part in. And I'm starting 2 books, one for each. One is Remember December, and this is a rereadathon hosted by Elizabeth of Bookins and Books is one of the co-hosts, but there's about 17 others. Anne Novella, Criminale, Erin of Erin Facer, Roz of Scallydadling, Shellyish, and Ms. Reads a Lot. So it's got the whole BookTube royal family is co-hosting it, and basically reread a book. There's some prompts there, and I, as usual, it's not because they're not interesting, but I have just chosen to go with a book that I've been holding up in so many videos recently. I better read the damn thing so I can talk about it. This is a book that I loved as a kid. The Greatest Gresham by Gillian Avery, and I was so delighted. That really compliments my blouse, isn't it? I was so delighted to find it in a box at the farm in the summer that I'm going to reread it because I can't remember anything about it. Can't remember why I loved it. I just remember that I've always kind of carried a torch for it. So I'm going to reread it as part of Remember December and tell you all about it. It's actually part of a series, which I don't think I ever cottoned onto back in the day. So if I like it, I might have to read the whole damn series. It was originally published in 1962. For those of you that didn't see my little spiel on it, I belonged to, there was a farming newspaper based in Saskatoon called the Western Producer, and they had a children's club of creative writing, and I joined. I was a member for many years, and you have a nickname. Mine was the Pancake Cowboy. That's what I chose for myself, the Pancake Cowboy. And there was many little clubs, and one club was a book circle where you just send books around to each member, and there was a piece of foolscap, and you'd write your review of the book on the foolscap, sign your name in pencil on the inside. So this one went around on my book club circle, and there I am at the top, Pancake Cowboy, and I was 12 when I read it. I wish I had kept the piece of foolscap with everybody's review, Karen, Renee, and Barbara's, and my thoughts. That would have been great. And also my grandparents made me a library sticker around that time, Library of Sean Mooney. So I've been a geek from way back. The next one I'm starting for Bob the Booker's in December to read books by independent publishers. And this one is from the Canadian independent publisher Invisible Publishing, based in Halifax and Toronto. As per my wee book haul video from last night, I am going to start this 1923 novel that has recently been brought back into print. It's Cattle by Winnifred Eaton, aka Onoto Watana, published in 1923, just brought back into print. Lots of people commented and gave me more information on the book haul. I got 5 comments by the time I woke up this morning. How wonderful. On the wee book haul I just put up last night. So Duncan McCurdy, whose channel you should be following, and he is one of my patrons as well, really great guy, and just knows about everything, anything that I want to talk about. He knows about 100 times more than I do. He's wonderful. So he told me that this author, Winnifred Eaton Reeve, was British Chinese, British father, Chinese mother. For whatever reason, she has a pseudonym that sounds very Japanese, but she was Chinese, British Chinese. So this is set on an Alberta ranch. I don't know if the characters are Asian. I will let you know that. But also Duncan told me that the author did actually ranch with her second husband in Western Canada. All right, that's what I got. What a wonderful life I have. And I hope yours is too. Thanks for watching.